idea of necessary connection has no corresponding impression if we cannot derive the idea from observation of repeated and constant conjunctions. Then on Hume's own principle, no impression, no idea. The idea of necessary connection between causes and effects becomes meaningless, a fraud, and nonsense. But Hume hangs on because the causal relation is so important to analyze. He asks, where then does the idea come from? This crucial and powerful idea, since it does not come from reason and it does not come from a sensory impression. What then is its source? It must then be subjective. It must come from the mind. And specifically, it must come from the psychological laws of association of ideas. The idea of necessary connection between causes and effects is not in the objects we observe, but only in the mind, he concludes. For after we have observed the constant conjunction of fire and the sensation of burning in our fingers, we feel a necessity of the mind to associate fire with burning. After we have experienced A followed by B repeatedly, by the association of ideas, we come to expect B to occur after A occurs. We have formed a habit of anticipating that B will occur after A. But even more, we feel compelled. We have a feeling of compulsion or propulsion. We have a gentle force of propelling us to expect B. It is this compulsion or necessity of the mind by the law of association of ideas to associate A with B, the flame with the burning sensation. It is this that is the internal and purely psychological source of our idea of necessary causal connection. Thus, the idea of necessary connection between particular causes and effects is derived not from rational self-evidence and not from any empirical sense impression, but only from the psychological association of our ideas. Hume's point is that we cannot perceive any cause producing necessarily any effect. The idea of necessary causality is therefore, on his own principle, worthless, false, and a fraud. When any A and B, the flame and the burning sensation, are in constant conjunction, then when A occurs, we expect B to occur. We have the habit of anticipating B. We feel a necessity, a compulsion, to expect B. We have now followed the main lines of Hume's very lengthy analysis of causality. As an extreme radical empiricist, he has demolished the claims of science to have discovered necessary causal laws of nature, such as the laws of mechanics, the law of gravity, the law of the circulation of the blood. Hume has shown that causal necessity is not an objective relationship between objects which scientists can observe, but is only a subjective compulsion to relate objects by the psychological laws of association. Causal necessity has no source in sense impressions, but its source is only in the laws of our own psychology. There are no necessary connections between objects, no necessary connection between the moon and the rise and fall of the tide. There is only the psychological necessity of our associating ideas with one another. As Hume himself says, objects have no discoverable connection together, nor is it from any other principle but custom that we draw any inference from one to the other. Do you think that scientific laws establish necessary causal connections? Do you think that every time an electric spark passes through a mixture of 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, that the necessary result will be that the gases will disappear and that water will begin to form? But Hume says, all you can know is what you have observed. How do you know that the next time you pass the electric spark through the mixture of gases that water will form? Aren't you assuming that the electric spark in the mixture of gases is the necessary cause of the formation of water as its necessary effect. But Hume has tried to show you that you have no right to talk of necessary connection. Hume's point is that the idea of necessary connection between cause and effect is something that experience can never give us. Each impression that we have in experience is a separate experience. What impression will follow another? What will happen when the spark touches the mixture of gases? This we can only learn by experience. But experience cannot guarantee that this effect is necessary.